Good evening and welcome to the bond hearing for the town of Litchfield, New Hampshire, for the purpose of building a new police facility. Pursuant to the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, the Litchfield Board of Selectmen hereby calls this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. at the Campbell High School Auditorium. We'd like everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a roll call vote for the selectmen present. Kim Queenan, Vice Chair, present. Kevin Lynch. John Brunel, present. Steve Gannon, present. And I'm Robert Leary. I'm also present, I think. Okay. Also, we have in attendance Kim Kleiner, Town Administrator, present. Police Chief Dan Jones, and Captain Dennis Tessier. Perfect. We are here this evening to discuss the proposed issuance of a bond or note that will exceed $100,000. The proposed bond or note is for constructing and equipping a new police station building and all related activities necessary for said construction, and to borrow in the name of the municipality by issuance of serial notes or bonds a sum not to exceed $6,500,000. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the chief and the captain. Their presentation. You can come up.
Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this evening. Start by getting this presentation ready. Unfortunately for some of you, you've seen this already, but in order just for everybody to be able to see it, we want to get this out there. Okay, this is our mission statement. I won't waste anybody's time with this. You can go on our website, which I'll show you later, and you can read our mission statement. That's just something we keep in there for people to read so they understand our mission, but I won't take the time to read it tonight. So we're looking at a new police department building, and the reason that we're asking for a new building, we have safety concerns, space constraints, and storage restrictions within the building. Obviously, we've outgrown the building. It was built in 1997, and there's been no growth since then, and technological advances throughout the years, changes in laws, changes in protocols have changed our needs. To start with, we have safety concerns. The current police station does not have adequate space for such tasks as weapons clearing, maintenance, evidence processing, and the place where we don't even have a specified area to process evidence. We wind up using our break room table where we eat our meals that is just an open break area. And there are chemicals we use, or just the substances that we are working with contain chemicals or drugs, and there's no separate ventilation as is the current protocol, or actually it's been a protocol for quite some time. Evidence storage, we're limited on storage space, and again, there's no evidence or there's no ventilation for that area. So whatever is stored in evidence, and as you can imagine, we have different chemicals and drugs and things like that that are in our storage that just get circulated up into the air conditioning heating system that just get blown out back through our building. There are layout dangers. In our booking area, the officer is in a place where he is trapped in the room if somebody who's being processed were to attack the officer, which has happened. They have no way to escape. They're trapped in that space. There is easy access to the interior of the facility and civilian staff. If somebody, again, were to be inside our building, there's no restriction of movement once you're inside, unless you happen to be in the booking area. So that is a major safety concern. Any police department that's being built currently, and actually any building that was built in 1997, when this building was built, restricted movement throughout the building so that civilians would be protected. Obviously, where officers are, you still want to restrict movement for different reasons, but especially with our civilian staff, you want to make sure you're protecting them. The Sally Port is not functional as designed. It was too small when it was built. There's not enough space because we are using it for storage, but even the cars do not fit in there totally, so we cannot secure the prisoners inside the Sally Port, which is basically a garage that we use to take the prisoner from the car into the holding cell. So because they're not contained, if they were to take off running and get away, obviously that's a problem. But even if they take off running and trip out on the driveway and break a leg, we own that now. We are responsible as a town for anything that happens to them while they're escaping because we don't have the facility designed to hold them. There is no bullet resist. Actually, there's one section of bullet resistant glass that really is in a place, is probably like the place where we need it the least. It just happens to be added the latest. So those are just some of the major safety concerns. There's inadequate space. The male locker room is at capacity. The female locker room is also, all the lockers are filled because we have to use it as storage. But at this point, if we were to even get another male officer, which we still have three openings technically, we're going to have to start either not giving lockers or having the officers, male officers, use the female locker room, which obviously is not ideal. We have, again, multi-purpose break room that's used for evidence collection or evidence processing, for weapons cleaning. Again, no ventilation for that, and it's being used or being done in a space where we eat our meals. There's inadequate office space. Several of the spaces are being used for different purposes, such as our prosecutor has an office that's also the records room. So that is obviously not ideal because there are people coming in and out of the prosecutor's office while he's trying to work, or if he has to close the door, then people don't have access to the records. We have supervisors sharing a space with a detective. Again, not ideal because the detective has things that the supervisors shouldn't see or hear, and the supervisors have things that the detective shouldn't see or hear. In addition to that, we have one SRO currently, and we should have another SRO relatively shortly. We're in the hiring process now. That second, or one of the two SROs could potentially be assigned to detectives over the summer break, or even the winter break for that matter, any break to assist the detective, and we have no place for that person to sit. The officers' area is too small for storage of records for the officers. They are sharing desks, which is fine. We have enough desks, but we don't have a storage space for their records and the cases that they're working. We have inadequate suspect lockup space. We have one adult holding cell, one juvenile holding cell, and even the juvenile holding cell is not in compliance because they're too close and within sound of the adult holding cell. There was a third holding cell at one point, but that is being used for our fingerprint machine. It's called an APHIS machine. So again, we are short just that space. Evidence retention, as I said before, we have limited space for evidence, and then the bathroom capacity, again, that's not a huge deal, but just something to consider. Limited record storage space. Most of our records are being stored in the basement of the old town hall, which I had never seen, quite honestly, until a few days ago, and I'm just amazed. They're just file boxes stacked, and we are required by law. Anytime one of our cases falls off and we're able to get rid of it, the state will contact us and say, okay, you can pull this now. So we're actually down there a fair amount to pull those records, but it's down in a basement and not very well climate controlled. It's just a big mildewy mess down there. Limited storage for evidence, limited storage for equipment. We will have a video that we can show tonight, and it shows just how limited our space is for everything we have. The officers' bags that they keep in the cars with them, they're duty bags. Obviously, nobody has a take-home car. None of the officers have take-home cars, so they have to take all their gear out at the end of their shift, and that goes into a storage area, but it's basically in a section of the Sally Port or garage. Sorry? Oh yeah, we have our Special Operations Unit. We're part of the Southern New Hampshire Special Operations Unit, which is basically a SWAT team. We have 2 members on there, and they have to carry their gear or store their gear, which takes up a fair amount of space as well. But even things like that, you would think, okay, well, it's a couple bags, it's not that big a deal, but it's literally, that's how limited our storage is. We have no police impound. So if somebody, a car is used in a crime, we have no place to store it that is controlled other than our sally port. So if it's a smaller car, we can get it in the sally port, but then we have to restrict access into the sally port. Because if it's been used in a crime, then that really should be controlled, who has access even to that space. Most departments will have an outdoor impound lot, maybe a fenced-in area where they can keep a car just fenced in if it's a minor thing, but major crimes have to be held inside. And we don't have the space, and then if we have to process it, we can't process it inside because, again, there's no ventilation, just like all of the other spaces. We have a small, just a tiny refrigerator that's used for any evidence that has to be refrigerated. State law now requires we keep it basically forever on any sexual assault cases. And that is in a space, like I said before, there are spaces that have dual and sometimes triple roles. Our armory houses our refrigerator for our evidence. Again, that should not be, because the officers have to be able to get in to drop off the evidence or get something out of the armory. But because of that, people who necessarily shouldn't have access do have access. And then the control of the evidence is bad because everybody has access to it, and it becomes a logistical headache for the evidence custodian to pull it from one place to another. And again, I hate to say a modern police department, but even when this building was built, what normally happens is the lockers are built right into a wall. Once the officer closes the locker, the officer cannot get back to the evidence again. Only the evidence custodian at that point can get to it, and that's for chain of custody for court, can get to it from the other side. So they basically pull it out of the back side of the locker, unlock it from the inside, and then process it right there, and it gets stored right there. From the armory, which is the size of a small closet, it's not even as big as not even a walk-in closet, just a regular closet. And then you have to walk out and around and through the booking room, which if somebody's being booked, now you can't get through there because you're not going to be carrying evidence through the booking room. There's not enough space to walk around. But they're having to go in there and store it in a space that was not designed to even be an interior space. It was originally outside, just under roof, that was framed in and has limited, again, climate control and no specific ventilation to filter out any carcinogens or any other things that we shouldn't be breathing inside the building. There's no bulk storage. Any of our bigger things just sit in the sally port. No storage for evidence supplies or PPE. Again, that's all out in the sally port. And I already told you the APHIS machine is in the holding cell. Okay, well, I guess I'll show you how to get to does anybody want to see this now? I'm going to show you how to get to this video once you leave here. I think everybody here has seen it. So you're saying you're good, Mike? Oh, you saw? Okay. So we're good. Thank you. So in 2020, a study was done by Castle Booz, it's a public safety architectural firm, did a study of the best way to move forward, whether we should add on to the police department as it sits at Town Hall, take over all of Town Hall, build a standalone police department somewhere else, or finish the public safety complex as was designed when they built the fire department. That was originally designed to be one big building for the fire department and the police department, and it was split off at the time because they felt the fire department had a bigger need and they didn't want to burden the taxpayers all at one time. So they built the fire department with the plan to finish. And I'm sure you can see a lot of this, but the bigger takeaways are, if we were to take over all of Town Hall, Then we have logistical problems of having to build a new town hall, having to find temporary housing for us while they do the renovations, and then all of those things. That is by far the most costly proposal. The second would be to add to the existing PD. And again, this is the second most costly proposal. The reason for that cost, there's several. One is we'd have to do it in stages because we would either have to find completely off-site housing temporarily, which is not an easy thing to do and not a cheap thing to do, but also it have to be done in phases. So anybody who's taking notes, and I see some of you taking notes, all of this whole slideshow is available online. I'll show you how to get there at the end, but feel free to take notes. So we'd have to find temporary housing, or the building would have to be done in phases. So anybody who has had to hire a contractor, if you were to tell them, okay, come in and do a third of the work in a month, come back, do a third of the work in 4 months, and then come back and do the last third of the month in 8 months, that's going to drive their costs. And then trying to time all of the different trades to do it in phases becomes very expensive, and it drags out the timeline of the project. The other areas include limited parking and things like that. So one of the reasons why it would be so expensive, another reason why it would be so expensive, is the fact that none of our holding cells, the evidence, all of that is all concrete block, and none of it is usable as it's designed. So it would have to be taken down unless we were just going to use it as a file room and then basically rebuild everything else someplace else, which would just add to the size of it. So that's part of the reason why it's so costly to try to do that. Obviously, a standalone building would be expensive. It would be the cost of buying the real estate, and then all of the engineering that would have to go into it, the site work that would have to go into it. It would have to be a bigger building than what we're looking for now. It would give us exactly what we wanted as far as needs, but it's still more expensive than the option we're looking at now. Plus, if we built a standalone building, it would likely take us off-site and possibly way off-site, so we wouldn't be close to the fire department, we wouldn't be close to town hall, where we're obviously dealing with both of those entities on a regular basis. So the last proposal, and the one recommended by this public safety facility planner, was to complete the project as it was designed, add on to the fire department. I'm sure everybody here knows where the fire department is, and behind the fire department, there's a grassy area that sticks off, so basically it makes the fire department look like a big L. I'll show you in a second where that it would actually be, but we'd build there. A lot of the site work is already done. From what I understand, even some of the utilities are capped and ready to go. In that, we'd be able to share some of the space with them as far as the big training room that they have, the kitchen that they have. Obviously, it's the least site impact because this, the site is already there. It would lead to a secure operational layout. It is the second most parking out of all of the options. The only downside is there would be some disruption to the fire department, which I have no problem with. Sorry, Chief Nickel. So I'm sure you can see that. It's the fire station there is along Albuquerque, and it would just run back off of there. So you can see it doesn't change any of the parking. We would actually probably kick out into that row. Right there. But overall, it wouldn't have a major impact on parking. We'd still have more parking than we would any of the other options outside of building a standalone building. All right, yeah, and there's a design there for the impound lot in the back corner. So this is just an artist rendering of what it would look like. You're looking at the red part of the building would be the fire department, and the part with the blue trim is obviously the police department. That is the basic layout of the building. When it's time for questions, if you want to ask specific questions, you can come up and and we'll go back to this slide. But again, this is available on the website, so people can look at this. Again, just more elevations. So this is a breakdown of the cost. Mr. Oblinus would be happy to see this is broken out a little bit more than in the past. At the last board meeting, they voted to add a little bit to the contingency of the building, but the total cost would be $6.5 million. So some of these stations are actually, I believe, underway. Some were just proposed by the respective towns. This was brought to us by a local construction company just for comparison's sake. I would say that as far as this first slide, the one that really matters most to us is the one in the upper left corner, Atkinson, at $9.4 million. You'll see it's just under $3 million more in the building we're asking for. And that is the most comparable town to us. It's actually a little bit smaller. It's 7,500 people, about 12 square miles. So it's just a little smaller than we are. They're looking for you can see it's a walkout basement in the back. So they're asking for a 2-story building. I'm sure that's driving some of the cost, why it's almost $2 or $3 million more. Because of ADA, you have to have an elevator and things like that. It's also a brick building. So it looks like it's going to be a little, more expensive to construct than the building we're looking at. Again, some of these other towns are a little bit bigger, but you have Exeter at $17.5 million, Salem at almost $37 million, and Bedford at $34 million. Right, okay. You're right. So we have to update this, and I'll do that, but because we added the extra $500,000 contingency, these numbers are going to change a little bit. So I don't even know if I want to spend a lot of time on these until I know what, yeah. So what is that percentage? It was basically 6 million before. Yeah, so it's 10%. So yeah, so 622. So yeah, so we'd be at 622 per square foot versus the 703. So we're still the lowest cost per square foot. That's including the soft cost with the hard cost. So you're looking at under 500. I'm sure Mr. Oblinus is doing the math, but it's going to be under 500 a square foot for the hard cost. So I almost don't like this slide because it's bringing down by resident, but obviously people aren't going to come in and everybody give, that percentage of money or that number of money. It's going to depend on your value. It also doesn't factor in all the businesses in town. They're going to pay more, the golf courses, Mel's, things like that. So it's hard to say that, where that's going to shake out exactly. But again, that's just a comparison to the other towns. But add roughly 10% to that, maybe a little bit more, and we're still way under the cost of the other buildings. So this is one way that many towns go through their municipal building project. They identify a need, perform a study the options, which is all these have been done, and develop conceptual plans and a project budget. Now we're asking for the warrant to get the municipal bonds, and then we'd work with an architect and construction manager to complete the building within the approved funds, and then they bid out the prices to ensure that we're built within. So here is the website. The police department website. This is the slideshow that we just watched, which again is when you go to our website, the police department website, you'll see that. And it's on the left. If that's not the first thing that comes up, it's on the left that I just clicked on. There. It shows the proposal. In addition to the slideshow, it has meetings, previous meetings about this, so you can hear what was said by me, by other people, by the public, by the board, and how we got to where we are now. And then there are other documents down below that show a lot of the things that we just showed you. This is just a notice. And these are the bonding options. Again, if you watch what I just did, you can get to it right from our website. It's one of the choices you can make. The Board of Selectmen has not determined which ones will be going to the voters yet, but this gives all of the different options. And that concludes my presentation. Anybody have any questions? The bond, yes, the bond has been changed.
Give a little bit of information on the bonding sheet. Know how to read it. Impact for 20 at 500 or 700. Obviously, assessments for homes go up and down. So even if your house is at 350 now, it's probably not going to be in 5 years, so it is going to fluctuate some, but it gives you an idea. And if you scroll to the bottom, yes. So you can kind of get an idea over the 15 years, a $350,000 house would have paid $2,431 towards the police station. And it's, obviously 20 years is going to be a little different. You can see what the total payment is that the town would have paid on the bond. But there's 4 different types. It's level debt is 4 types of level debt: 15-year, 20-year, 25, 30. Same for level principal: 15, 20, 25, 30. But it's just to give residents an idea of what the impact to them.
So again, I invite anybody to come by the station if they do want a tour. Obviously, there's a lot of people may watch this at home later. If you have any questions, feel free. There's a place right on our website to submit a question.
Hi, Ronald Blinas, 15 Riverview Circle. Couple of things. And I've said this before, and I'm trying to be succinct, but I do believe we've got a little bit of the cart before the horse here, in the sense that we did do a study back in 2020, and as I brought up at, what meeting was it? The budget hearing, was that what it was? Last week, I think. The estimate that you have in the, in fact, it's phase 2 right there on that, Chief. You want to just click on that? Perfect, thank you. When I was looking through the documentation, discovered this estimate here, and as you pointed out, this is the engineer we used, Castle Blues, back in 2020. And if you notice, under building construction cost, the station is listed as 10,440 square feet. So that's the same building we're talking about here, which you presented. The interesting thing, or the disturbing thing, however you want to look at it, is back in 2020, there was an estimate for $8 million. And now we're saying that it can be done for 6.5, and that got up to 6.5 because I expressed substantive concerns that it was even low, substantively low at 5.9. And there was a contingency added to that, as you pointed out in your slide presentation. So the difficulty I have is this actually, to me, is a far more reasonable estimate. And the reason I say that is remembering this number of 8. Can you go back to your presentation, please, that had the total cost per square foot? Yep, right, is that the one? Yes, oh, no, not the hard cost, the one. Oh, so, okay.
That's right.
Go down a little, I think you can get it, so you can make it go one slide at a time. Yeah, right down the bottom there, see that little, to the left. No, way to the left where it says 7. See where it says 7? Way in the bottom. Yep, that's the one, great.
No, that's the one?
Thank you, John. So when I first looked at this as represented, it seemed extremely low, that 5.68. You know, having been in the business, it's like something doesn't sit right. So when I saw that estimate of Castle Blues at 8 million, if you divide the 10,444 by 8 million, you come up with a number of $765 per square foot. And ironically, if you compare that to the other 3 that we would say is compatible, that's right in the ballpark. We're kind of right in the middle. And so this calculation adds validity that our number should be in the $8 million range, not the 6.5. So I really do think this is not the right number. I think we go forward with this and try to build out what you're proposing. You'll end up with another LMS2 of overrun substantive. The other thing that happens, and I was a little taken aback in the presentation that Preston Hunter, that was from Beckman, made, and he made the statement that, well, if we bid it out and we find that we don't have enough money, we'll just start cutting and reducing the size of the building. Well, two things are wrong with that. We should know that we're at the right price. Secondly, if we're going to cut out the size of it, it means the building's too big to begin with. The point of this, and I say it again, we don't have an engineer on board. That estimate of the $8 million, we don't know if that's accurate. The 6.5 is a hodgepodge of different people inputting things that really are not engineers. So that number for me is very suspect at best. I'll finish up by saying this should be rethought. The process should start over again with the hiring, or excuse me, a warrant article that supports funding an engineer to be brought on board to develop plans, look at options. Quite truthfully, the options they looked at were gold-plated options. I think there's certainly use of the building with expansions that are far more affordable than was presented and looked at by Castle Booze. But more to the point is we don't have an engineer on board to be asking for a construction bond at this point is, I think, irresponsible. And to go forward with it is expecting to end up with another, well, I'll use the word disaster because that's a word that's used in a funding analysis that was done by the Department of Education that talks about how to do school projects. And if you do exactly what we're doing here, they use the term, you're likely to have a disaster. And I think we could be if we continue this way.
But just to answer a couple of those, and Ron, I appreciate your comments because it actually makes me go back and look at different things. So Castle Blues is, from what I understand, they are, like you said, they're a gold-plated business. They design top-end buildings, mostly in Massachusetts, so they have that mindset. The cost that we came from a cost estimator who built our fire department within budget. That's what he does. He does cost estimations. So Castle Blues, they are an engineer, but even in their pricing of their own costs, like you keep saying, the $630,000 they had priced out for their engineering. I went to Warren Street today. I reached out to them and said, look, we're not ready to put this out to bid or anything, but is this cost that we have budgeted in here, is this a reasonable number, or are we majorly short because I don't want to put this out to bid and then not get what we need? He said, nope, you're right on line with where you should be. And again, this is a company who worked for us and who gave us a product that we were happy with, that came within budget. And when you look at something like Atkinson, which is the closest building, but even the other buildings, they're all brick buildings, multi-story. They are Cadillac buildings. We are looking to do a bare bones building, just like the fire department is. There's nothing extravagant in that building. We're looking for a similar building to that building. It's going to be basically an extension of it. Plus the fact that the site work, a majority of it is already done. So that's going to be another major savings over some of these other places.
And I will agree that the 8 million may be high. And the 6.5 might be doable with some sharpening of the pencils. The problem is we don't know. That's the real concern here, is we don't have an engineer that's actually been hired, that actually has developed plans, has actually developed a schedule of material, has actually worked with us to develop what we want, and then we have not hired a construction manager. The construction manager would then work with the architect and do just what we did when we built Town Hall and Fire Station, and I think even this, is once we get a design, you hire a construction manager. They come on board, they work with us to finalize plans, we make adjustments based upon what they see as cost savings. They then go out and price it and bring in a guaranteed maximum price. That's what you bring to the town. We only get an engineer on board. The point being is we don't know and to be bringing us a proposal as if it's all done and ready to go out to bid is wrong. And I will finish up by saying, Chief, that everything you put up there as far as the deficiencies in the building, I support 100%. I am not opposed to doing anything, and I'll say it again. There needs to be something done. I just think we need to start over again and look at it. We need to hire somebody now that's going to take us through the process. And I think whether it's $765 a square foot, representing the 8 million, or somewhere in between. But I don't think it's 568. I really don't.
So, and again, I appreciate that. I wasn't here when the town hall was built, nor was I here when the fire department was built. So I'm going to go on your word in the town hall because I haven't looked at it, at how that was done. But I do know that it was built in 97, and the first time it was noted that it was deficient was 2 years later. So that was not built the way I would want to build a police station. The fire department was built, and again, I'm going by the documents that the town has and looking at the history of the Board of Selectmen, those things, exactly the way we're doing it now. It's no different than what I know other people remember differently, but the documents that we have found show that they went through the same exact process that we're going through now. Anyone else? If you don't mind, Mike, come up to the microphone.
My name is Michael Anaskovich, 20th Century Lane. First, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate you guys coming out here. So I just have a couple higher level questions. The options, the 4 options that you presented, are these, I imagine, or I assume these are options to the whole, the one big building that you wanted to.
Which would be off-site somewhere.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay. So taking over the town hall, adding to the existing police department standalone building, which was option 3, and then adding to the fire department, those are all options that you were given by Castle Booze, correct?
Correct. And then that was looked at, they did that study in 2020. It went to the Board of Selectmen in 2020.
Okay.
And based on that recommendation, they got the original plans, the plans that you looked at here for this building,
Sure.
because it made the most sense, because it keeps us on campus. It was the cheapest. It gets us where we need to be. It connects us to the fire department. And again, it solves all our problems without being.
Sure. So their recommendation was to add to the fire department.
Correct.
Do you agree with that recommendation?
100%.
Okay. Is there, okay, so I guess I would be interested to know, is this something that for the selectmen to then decide, well, is this a recommendation we agree with as well? So I guess it would be up to them to take your recommendation.
Right. So again, they led the path in 2020. They voted to move forward with this project that we're doing now.
Okay. So let's just assume none of these options are palatable, all right? And we saw what happened with the school. In response to that, the town came together and put together several volunteers who were passionate about doing something, and they created the Facilities Improvement Committee, spent a lot of time on that, and I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration, let's say none of these options go through. Has there, or is there any thought about putting together something similar to the School Facilities and Improvement Committee to address, what are really your high level or most important improvements that you can make here, aside from the 4 options?
Right. So we haven't crossed that bridge yet. If we go to the voters, and they vote it down, then we'll have to step back and look and say,
Sure.
What are our best options? And I'm sure that would be one of the options we could look at is to create just
Okay.
such a thing.
Okay. Okay, and then final question, on the four options, I didn't see financial estimates associated with each of those?
The only other option that was actually done out, and it was the second most costly option, was 9.5 million for a standalone building. Is that the number that I remember? It was 9.5 million, and that's on the website. If you give me a second, I'm struggling with this computer for whatever reason.
You know, I was just trying to understand kind of from a high level standpoint, what the various proposals are, what the recommendations are, and kind of what the general cost associated with each would be.
See, so, yeah, so from talking to them, doesn't do anything. The other two, so
Okay, all right.
not like, a lot of that building is not going costly is none of the cells, anything that is concrete now, we can't use as it is. It would just literally have to be taken down. And then we would have to do site work around where we are. We'd have to take away parking, which means we'd have to make more parking somewhere else.
Sure.
So it just becomes way more expensive to try to do that. Plus, it has to be done in phases because we can't be there while they're doing this major.
Understood, understood. I
So
was just looking
again,
for,
it's like saying, well, should I get a Toyota, a Honda, or a Rolls Royce? Well, you don't need to go out and get the options list on the Rolls Royce because it's so much more expensive than, and again, who was it that was out of the other buildings that's tearing down the building and restarting? Was it Salem or? Salem, which was the $39 million building, because they're doing the same thing. They like where they are, so they're having to take down and start over.
oh, completely understood. I was just trying to associate options
Please.
with costs.
Yep.
Finally, I mean, this is hard. I mean, we know the school didn't pass, ergo the Facilities Improvement Committee. You know, I think it's going to be, this will obviously be a tough thing for the town to swallow, especially since they said no to the school. And when you look at what the Facilities Improvement Committee is doing, those are going to cost, those options will cost money as well, right? So my only concern with this is just kind of, you know, big priority A versus B. So,
Right.
for instance, if we're to vote in the new police department or whatever option it is that we decide is the best way to go, and the townspeople like it, well, what does that do to, you know, the potential for us to make improvements to the school? So, you know, I see this as a real source of tension. And I mean, I totally agree with what your proposal is, or not your proposal, but what you're saying about the facilities. There's no question that there's a need, right? There's a lot of needs, but, you know, I just see that there's going to be a real struggle for this, but I'm not dismissing that there.
Right, and we agree with you 100%. Like I think there's not one person in the police department who says, oh, the school doesn't need anything. We understand the school, they need to do something with that building.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, I haven't studied, but I know they need something. You don't need an engineering degree to figure that out, right?
Understood.
So they need something. We're all for that. We have a great relationship with the school. We're standing in one of the schools right now, so we want to help the schools as much as we can. In fact, we've worked very closely with the schools. My job, our job, is to bring the issues, the potential liabilities to the Board of Selectmen and to the voters.
Fair enough.
And then the voters have to weigh out, just like the school does, the same thing. They bring their issues to the school board and then the voters. And then it's up to the voters to say, okay, we want this or not this and this or both or neither, or whatever it is. And then, okay, so now we have to regroup.
Yeah.
But it's our job first and foremost to bring this information out. And then
Absolutely.
it is what it is.
No, of course. I mean, I just love the approach of if it can work, small improvements over time rather than waiting for a big bang. That's where the Facilities Improvement Committee is. That's kind of where their mindset is. So, you know, unless there's some big catastrophe that we have no choice. But anyway, thank you for taking my questions, and thank you for the
Appreciate
the
it.
presentation.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike, I may be able to answer a couple of your questions. I had conversations with the former chief a few years back when we were first discussing this in earnest. And because there was a former selectman who once said that even though the building was designed to have both of them there, that there was no way that the police needed a new facility. They could add on to theirs. So I'm talking to the former chief about it, and I asked him, what do you think it's going to cost? And he said from his discussions with construction people, it was going to be around $7 to $8 million to add on to that building, okay? And the number that he originally gave me for the add-on to the fire department was $9 million, which I told him both of them were too expensive. But those are the numbers that he had gotten over the course of time, talking to people. He might have been talking to Ekman or whoever it was that did the fire station. I don't know. He didn't tell me who he was talking to, but the people that he did speak to, those were the numbers that he was giving me. So that might help you a little bit. Yeah.
Ryan Pettit, 132 Page Road. Thank you for the presentation. Clearly, it would have been great if the safety complex had been built as intended back however many, 8 years ago. That seems to be an ongoing issue with the town, not being able to do the project the way it needs to be done to last for any period of time. While I clearly think the best option would be doing the public safety complex as intended, as you're proposing, adding the police department onto the fire station, I don't see this as the top priority of the town. The top priority needs to be GMS, the elementary school. What's going to be done about that? The state has ranked GMS as number 5 across the state in terms of top priority projects to be financed. And when it comes to just ranking it on safety, it's ranked at number 2. So and we're talking about the students, the learning environment. I think that is where our priority has to be. What I'm concerned about is if we went forward with a bond, a 7-figure bond up to 6.5 million, or if what Ronald Blemis said could possibly be as much as 8 million, I think that would eliminate any potential for a school to be built, or for any major renovation to be done on the school, or any option to be actually feasible if we're spending $6.5 million to $8 million on the police department. And while clearly I see that you have issues, no question, I'm not going to argue about that, I just think the school's issues are far more pressing and a bigger priority. And I think that's what the town has to look at, that the school has to be number 1, and clearly then the police department would definitely come in a close second. But I think the GMS has to go first. And thank you for your effort on educating the town. I just think that we have to find out what the Facilities Improvement Committee is doing for the GMS before we go forward or proceed with any kind of a bond that's going to be 7 figures. Thank you.
Just one clarification. I appreciate your input, and again, that's why we're here tonight, is so that people come up and tell us how they feel. But the bond or the warrant would be up to 6.5 million. So that's the most it could be. It can't be 8 million. It can't be 6.6 million. The only thing you can do from the 6.5 million is to go down. If we were to get a grant, or let's say we didn't need as much of the contingency, we would not sell. We can sell the bonds in $100,000 increments. So the most it would be 6.5. Just for clarification, I know probably doesn't change your mind, but just want to make sure that we have the right number out there.
Well, clearly it's good that you have the contingency. You have a fair amount of money for the contingency, but you could still run into the same problems that the fire department's building had to be brought down. The town hall, when that was built, it wasn't built, it didn't have the basement, didn't have the storage required. So it's just that you could be saying up to 6.5 million and then saying, OMG, we should have gone to 8 million, and now we're going to be back to the same situation that you have a building and you're going to have to deal with it in 2, 4, 6 years. And that's a painful process for the town to go through, especially when it's going to be happening at the same time where the School Facilities Improvement Committee is going to be coming forward to the town and say, look, this is what we need to do, whether it's renovation, additions, whatever, the new school, whatever they plan on proposing. That's something the town is going to have to deal with. And I think if we do the 6.5 million, we have the potential to not have the capacity to take on the project for the school.
Right, and that's why we're moving this forward, because we don't want to wind up like they wound up with the police department was built 30 years ago, where it was underbuilt at the time. Want to make sure we build something that's going to last. So that's what we're trying to do is make something that in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, the building is still serviceable. So we do it once and do it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night. Anyone else? Mr. Chairman? Thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to come up? Okay. Hearing none, we will entertain a motion to adjourn this public hearing. We have a motion from Mr. Gannon. We have a second from Ms. Queenan. Mr. Hayes, you would like to, but you're not on the selectmen. Yet. All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and the questions and all the information. Thank you, Chief, and you guys for everything you've done. Everyone have a wonderful night.